Check. Alright guys, last time we finished chapters 1 through 3, so let's do a few more today. Ready? Chapter 4. The Road Through the Forest. After a few hours, the road began to be rough, and the walking grew so difficult that the Scarecrow often stumbled over the yellow bricks, which were here very uneven. Sometimes, indeed, they were broken or missing altogether, leaving holes that Toto jumped across and Dorothy walked around. As for the Scarecrow, having no brains, he walked straight ahead, and so stepped into the holes and fell at full length on the hard bricks. It never hurt him, however, and Dorothy would pick him up and set him upon his feet again, while he joined her in laughing merrily on his own mishap. The farms were not nearly so well cared for as they were back further. There were fewer houses and fewer fruit trees, and the further they went, the more dismal and lonesome the country became. At noon, they sat down by the roadside near a little brook, and Dorothy opened her basket and got out some bread. She offered a piece to the Scarecrow, but he refused. I am never hungry, he said. And it is a lucky thing I am not, for my mouth is only painted, and if I should cut a hole in it so I could eat, the straw I am stuffed with would come out, and I would spoil the shape of my head. Dorothy saw at once that this was true, so she only nodded and went on eating her bread. Tell me something about yourself and the country you came from, said the Scarecrow, when she had finished her dinner. So she told him all about Kansas, and how gray everything was there, and how the cyclone had carried her to this queer land of Oz. The Scarecrow listened carefully and said, I cannot understand why you should wish to leave this beautiful country and go back to the gray place you call Kansas. That is because you have no brains, answered the girl. No matter how dreary and gray our homes are, we people of flesh and blood would rather live there than in any country, be it ever so beautiful. There is no place like home. The Scarecrow sighed. Of course, I cannot understand it, he said. If your heads were stuffed with straw like mine, you would probably all live in the beautiful places, and then Kansas would have no people at all. It is fortunate for Kansas that you have brains. Won't you tell me a story while we are resting? Asked the child. The Scarecrow looked at her reproachfully and asked, My life has been so short, and I really know nothing whatever. I was only made day before yesterday. What happened in the world before that time is all unknown to me. Luckily, when the farmer made my head, one of the first things he did was paint my ears, so that I heard what was going on. There was another munchkin with him, and the first thing I heard was the farmer saying, How do you like those ears? They aren't straight, answered the other. Never mind, said the farmer. They are ears just the same, which was true enough. Now I'll make the eyes, said the farmer. So he painted my right eye, and as soon as it was finished, I found myself looking at him and everything around me with a great deal of curiosity, for this was my first glimpse of the world. That's a rather pretty eye, remarked the munchkin, who was watching the farmer. Blue paint is just the color for eyes. I think I'll make the other a little bigger, said the farmer, and when the second eye was done, I could see much better than before. Then he made my nose and my mouth, but I did not speak, because at the time I didn't know what a mouth was for. I had the fun of watching them make my body and my arms and legs, and when they fastened on my head at last, I felt very proud, for I thought I was just as good as anyone. This fellow will scare the crows fast enough, said the farmer. He looks just like a man. Why is he a man? Said the other. Why, he is a man, said the other, and I quite agreed with him. The farmer carried me under his arm to the cornfield, and set me up on a tall stick, where you found me. He and his friend soon after walked away and left me alone. I did not like to be deserted this way, so I tried to walk after them, but my feet would not touch the ground, and I was forced to stay on that pole. It was a lonely life to lead, for I had nothing to think of, having been made such a little while before. Many crows and other birds flew into the cornfield, but as soon as they saw me they flew away again, thinking I was a munchkin, and this pleased me and made me feel that I was quite an important person. By and by an old crow flew near me, and after looking at me carefully he perched upon my shoulder and said, "I wonder if that farmer thought to fool me in this clumsy manner. Any crow of sense could see that you are only stuffed with straw." Then he hopped down at my feet and ate all the corn he wanted. The other birds, seeing he was not harmed by me, came to eat the corn too, so in a short time there was a great flock of them about me. I felt sad at this, for it showed I was not such a good scarecrow after all. But the old crow comforted me, saying, "If you only had brains in your head, you would be as good as any man. You would be as good a man as any of them, and better a man than some of them. Brains are the only things worth having in this world, no matter whether one is a crow or a man." After the crows had gone, I thought this over, and decided I would try to get some brains. By good luck, you came along and pulled me off the stake, and from what you say, I am sure the Great Oz will give me brains as soon as we get to the Emerald City. "I hope so," said Dorothy earnestly, "since you seem anxious to have them." "Oh yes, I am anxious," returned the Scarecrow. "It is such an uncomfortable feeling to know one is a fool." "Well," said the girl, "let us go," and she handed the basket to the Scarecrow. There were no fences at all by the roadside now, and the land was rough and untilled. Toward everything they came to a great forest, where the trees were so big and close together that their branches met over the road of yellow brick. It was almost dark under the trees, for the branches shut out the daylight, but the travelers did not stop, and went on into the forest. "If this road goes in, it must come out," said the Scarecrow, "and as the Emerald City is at the other end of the road, we must go wherever it leads." "Anyone would know that," said Dorothy. "Certainly, that is why I know it," returned the Scarecrow. "If it required brains to figure out, I never should have said it." After an hour or so, the light faded away, and they found themselves stumbling along in the darkness. Dorothy could not see at all, but Toto could, for some dogs see very well in the dark. That's not true, and the Scarecrow declared he could see as well as by day, so she took hold of his arm and managed to get along fairly well. "If you see any house or any place where we can pass the night," she said, "you must tell me, for it is very uncomfortable walking in the dark." Soon after, the Scarecrow stopped. "I see a little cottage at the right of us," he said, "built of logs and branches. Shall we go there?" "Yes, indeed," answered the child. "I am all tired out." So the Scarecrow led her through the trees until they reached the cottage, and Dorothy entered and found a bed of dried leaves in one corner. She lay down at once, and with Toto beside her soon fell into a sound sleep. The Scarecrow, who was never tired, stood up into another corner and waited patiently until the morning came. Alright, let's look at Chapter 5 now. The Rescue of the Tin Woodman. When Dorothy awoke, the sun was shining through the trees, and Toto had long been out chasing birds around him and squirrels. She sat up and looked around her. There was the Scarecrow, still standing patiently in his corner, waiting for her. "We must go and search for water," she said to him. "Why do you want water?" he asked. "To wash my face clean after the dust of the road, and to drink, so the dry bread will not stick in my throat." "It must be inconvenient to be made of flesh," said the Scarecrow thoughtfully, "for you must sleep and eat and drink. However, you have brains, and it is worth a lot of bother to be able to think properly." They left the cottage and walked through the trees until they found a little spring of clear water, where Dorothy drank and bathed and ate her breakfast. She saw there was not much bread left in the basket, and the girl was thankful the Scarecrow did not have to eat anything, for there was scarcely enough for herself and Toto for the day. When she had finished her meal and was about to go back to the road of yellow brick, she was startled to hear a deep groan nearby. "What was that?" she asked timidly. "I cannot imagine," replied the Scarecrow, "but we can go and see." Just then another groan reached their ears, and the sound seemed to come from behind them. They turned and walked through the forest a few steps, when Dorothy discovered something shining in a ray of sunshine that fell between the trees. She ran to the place and then stopped short with a little cry of surprise. One of the big trees had been partly chopped through, and standing beside it, with an uplifted axe in his hands, was a man made entirely of tin. His head and arms and legs were jointed upon his body, but he stood perfectly motionless, as if he could not stir at all. Dorothy looked at him in amazement, and so did the Scarecrow, while Toto barked sharply and made a snap at the tin legs, which hurt his teeth. "Did you groan?" asked Dorothy. "Yes," answered the Tin Man, "I did. I've been groaning for more than a year, and no one has ever heard me before or come to help me." "What can I do for you?" she inquired softly, for she was moved by the sad voice in which the man spoke. "Can't get an oil can and oil my joints," he answered. "They are rusted so badly that I cannot move them at all. If I am well oiled, I shall soon be all right again. You will find an oil can on a shelf in my cottage." Dorothy at once ran back to the cottage and found the oil can. And then she returned and asked anxiously, "Where are your joints?" "Oil my neck first," replied the Tin Man. So she oiled it, and as it was quite badly rusted, the Scarecrow took hold of the tin head and moved it gently from side to side until it worked freely, and then the man could turn it himself. "Now oil the joints of my arms," he said, and Dorothy oiled them, and the Scarecrow bent them carefully until they were quite free from rust, as good as new. The Tin Man gave a sigh of satisfaction and lowered his axe, which he leaned against the tree. "This is a great comfort," he said. "I have been holding that axe in the air ever since I rusted, and I'm glad to be able to put it down at last. Now, if you will oil the joints of my legs, I shall be all right once more." So they oiled his legs until he could move them freely, and he thanked them again and again for his release, for he seemed a very polite creature and very grateful. "I might have stood there always if you had not come along," he said. "So you have certainly saved my life. How did you happen to be here?" "We are on our way to the Emerald City to see the Great Oz," she answered, "and we stopped at your cottage to pass the night." "Why do you wish to see Oz?" he asked. "I want him to send me back to Kansas, and the Scarecrow wants him to put a few brains into his head," she replied. The Tin Woodman appeared to think deeply for a moment. Then he said, "Do you suppose Oz could give me a heart?" "Why, I guess so," Dorothy answered. "It would be as easy as to give the Scarecrow brains." "True," the Tin Man returned. "So, if you will allow me to join your party, I will also go to the Emerald City and ask Oz to help me." "Come along, come along," said the Scarecrow heartily, and Dorothy added that she would be pleased to have his company. So the Tin Woodman shouldered his axe, and they all passed through the forest until they came to the road that was paved with yellow brick. The Tin Woodman had asked Dorothy to put the oil can in her basket. "For," he said, "if I should get caught in the rain and rust again, I would need oil can badly." It was a bit of good luck to have their new comrade join the party, For soon after they had begun their journey again, they came to a place where the trees and branches grew so thick over the road that the travelers could not pass. But the Tin Woodman set to work with his axe and chopped so well that soon he cleared a passage for the entire party. Dorothy was thinking so earnestly as they walked along that she did not notice when Scarecrow stumbled into a hole and rolled over to the side of the road. Indeed, he was obliged to call to her to help him up again. "Why didn't you walk around the hole?" asked the Tin Woodman. "I don't know enough," replied the Scarecrow cheerfully. "My head is stuffed with straw, you know, and that is why I am going to Oz to ask him for some brains." "Oh, I see," said the Tin Man. "But after all, brains are not the best thing in the world." "Have you any?" inquired the Scarecrow. No, no, my head is empty," answered the Woodman. "But once I had brains and a heart also. So, having tried them both, I should much rather have a heart." "And why is that?" asked the Scarecrow. "I will tell you my story, and then you will know." So, while they were walking through the forest, the Tin Woodman told the following story. "I was born the son of a woodman who chopped down trees in the forest and sold the wood for a living. When I grew up, I too became a wood chopper, and after my father died, I took care of my old mother as long as she lived. Then I made up my mind that instead of living alone, I would marry, so that I might not become lonely. There was one of the Munchkin girls who was so beautiful that I soon grew to love her with all my heart. She, on her part, promised to marry me as soon as I could earn enough money to build a better house for her. So I set to work harder than ever, but the girl lived with an old woman who did not want her to marry anyone, for she was so lazy she wished the girl to remain with her and do the cooking and the housework. So the old woman went to the Wicked Witch of the East and promised her 2 sheep and a cow if she would prevent the marriage. Thereupon the Wicked Witch enchanted my axe, and when I was chopping away at my best one day, for I was anxious to get the new house and my wife as soon as possible, the axe slipped all at once and cut off my left leg. This at first seemed a great misfortune, for I knew a one-legged man could not do very well as a wood chipper, so I went to a tinsmith and had him make a new leg out of tin. The leg worked very well once I was used to it, but my action angered the Wicked Witch of the East, for she had promised the old woman I should not marry the pretty Munchkin girl. When I began chopping again, my axe slipped and cut off my right leg. Again I went to the tinsmith, and again he made me a leg out of tin. After this the enchanted axe cut off my arms, one after the other, but nothing daunted, I had them replaced with tin ones. The Wicked Witch then made the axe slip and cut off my head, and at first I thought that was the end of me, but the tinsmith happened to come along and he made a new head out of tin. I thought I had beaten the Wicked Witch then, and I had worked harder than ever, but I little knew how cruel my enemy could be. She thought of a new way to kill my love for the beautiful Munchkin maiden, and made my axe slip again, so that it cut right through my body, splitting me into 2 halves. Once more the tinsmith came to my help and made me a body of tin, fastening my tin arms and legs and head to it by means of joints, so that I could move around and well as ever. But alas, I had now no heart, so that I lost all my love for the Munchkin girl, and did not care whether I married her or not. I suppose she is still living with the old woman, waiting for me to come after her. My body shone so brightly in the sun that I felt very proud of it, and it did not matter now if my axe slipped, for it could not cut me. There was only one danger, that my joints would rust, but I kept an oil can in my cottage and took care to oil myself whenever I needed it. However, there came a day when I forgot to do this, and being caught in a rainstorm, before I thought of the danger my joints had rusted, and I was left to stand in the woods until you came to help me. It was a terrible thing to undergo, but during the year I stood there, I had time to think that the greatest loss I had known was the loss of my heart. While I was in love, I was the happiest man on earth. But no one can love who has not a heart. So I am resolved to ask Oz to give me one. If he does, I will go back to the Munchkin maiden and marry her. Both Dorothy and the Scarecrow had been greatly interested in the story of the 10 Woodmen, and now they knew why he was so anxious to get a new heart. All the same, said the Scarecrow, I shall ask for brains instead of a heart. For a fool would not know. All the same, said the Scarecrow, I shall ask for brains instead of a heart, for a fool would not know what to do with a heart if he had one. I shall take the heart, returned the Woodman, for brains do not make one happy, and happiness is the best thing in the world. Dorothy did not say anything, for she was puzzled to know which of her friends was right, and she decided if she could only get back to Kansas and Aunt Em, it would not matter so much whether the Woodman had no brains and the Scarecrow had no heart, or each got what he wanted. What worried her most was that the bread was nearly gone, and another meal for herself and Toto wouldn't empty the basket. To be sure, neither the Woodman nor the Scarecrow ever ate anything, but she was not made of tin nor straw, and could not live unless she was fed. Alright, let's finish up with Chapter 6. Looks like we're going to meet the Cowardly Lion, and then the trio will be complete. Alright. All this time, Dorothy and her companions had been walking through the thick woods. The road was still paved with yellow brick, but these were much covered by dried branches and dead leaves from the trees, and the walking was not at all good. There were few birds in this part of the forest, for birds love the open country where there is plenty of sunshine. But now and then there came a deep growl from some wild animal hidden in the trees. These sounds made the little girl's heart beat fast, for she did not know what made them. But Toto knew, and he walked close to Dorothy's side and did not ever bark in return. How long will it be, the child asked of the Tin Woodman, before we are at the forest? I cannot tell, was the answer, for I have never been to Emerald City, but my father went there once when I was a boy, and he said it was a long journey through a dangerous country. Although nearer to the city where Oz dwells, the country is beautiful, but I am not afraid so long as I have my oil can, and nothing can hurt the Scarecrow, while you bear upon your forehead the mark of the Good Witch's kiss, and that will protect you from harm. But Toto, said the girl anxiously, what will protect him? We must protect him ourselves if he is in danger, replied the Tin Woodman. Just as he spoke, there came from the forest a terrible roar, and the next moment a great lion bounded into the road. With one blow of his paw, he sent the Scarecrow spinning over and over to the edge of the road, and then he struck at the Tin Woodman with his sharp claws, but, to the lion's surprise, he could make no impression on the tin, although the Woodman fell into the road and lay still. Little Toto, now that he had an enemy to face, ran barking towards the lion, and the great beast had opened his mouth to bite the dog, when Dorothy, fearing Toto would be killed and heedless of danger, rushed forward and slapped the lion upon his nose as hard as she could, while she cried out, "Don't you dare bite Toto! You ought to be ashamed of yourself, a big beast like you, to bite a poor little dog." "I didn't bite him," said the lion, as he rubbed his nose with his paw where Dorothy had hit him. No, but you tried to, she retorted. You're nothing but a big coward. I know it, said the lion, hanging his head in shame. I've always known it, but now... But how can I help it? I don't know, I'm sure. I don't know, I'm sure. To think of your striking a stuffed man like a poor scarecrow. Is he stuffed? Asked the lion in surprise, as he watched her pick up the scarecrow and set him upon his feet, while she patted him into shape again. Of course he's stuffed, replied Dorothy, who was still angry. That's why he went over so easily, remarked the lion. It astonished me to see him whirl around so. Is the other one stuffed also? No, said Dorothy, he's made of tin. And she helped the woodman again. But that's why he nearly blunted my claws, said the lion. I need to think of a better voice for the lion. That's why he nearly blunted my claws, said the lion. When they scratched against the tin, it made a cold shiver run down my back. What is that little animal you are so tender of? He is my dog, Toto, answered Dorothy. Is he made of tin or stuffed? Asked the lion. Neither. He's a meat dog, said the girl. Oh, he's a curious animal, and seems remarkably small now that I look at him. No one would think of biting such a little thing, except a coward like me, continued the lion sadly. What makes you a coward? Asked Dorothy, looking at the great beast in wonder, for he is as big as a small horse. It's a mystery, replied the lion. I suppose I was born that way. All the other animals in the forest naturally expect me to be brave, for the lion is everywhere thought to be the king of the beasts. I learned that if I roared very loudly, every living thing was frightened and got out of my way. However, whenever I've met a man, I've been awfully scared, but I have just roared at him, and he has always run away as fast as he could go. If the elephants and the tigers and the bears had ever tried to fight me, I should have run myself. I'm such a coward. But just as soon as they hear me roar, they all try to get away from me, and of course I let them go. But that isn't right. The king of the beasts shouldn't be a But that isn't right. The king of the beasts shouldn't be a coward, said the scarecrow. I know it, returned the lion, wiping a tear from his eye with the tip of his tail. It is my great sorrow. It makes my life very unhappy. But whenever there is danger, my heart begins to beat fast. Perhaps you have a heart disease, said the Tin Man. It may be, said the lion. If you have, continued the Woodman, you ought to be glad, for it proves you have a heart. But for my part, I have no heart, so I cannot have a heart disease. Perhaps, said the lion thoughtfully. If I had no heart, I should not be a coward. Have you brains? Asked the scarecrow. I suppose so. I've never looked to see, replied the lion. I am going to the great Oz to ask him to give me some, remarked the scarecrow, for my head is stuffed with straw. And I am going to ask him to give me a heart, said the woodman. And I am going to ask him to send Toto and me back to Kansas, added Dorothy. Do you think Oz could give me courage? Asked the cowardly lion. Just as easily as he could give me brains, said the scarecrow. Or give me a heart, said the Tin Woodman. Or send me back to Kansas, said Dorothy. Then, if you don't mind, I'll go with you, said the lion, for my life is simply unbearable without a bit of courage. You will be very welcome, answered Dorothy, for you will help to keep away the other wild beasts. It seems to me they must be more cowardly than you if they allow you to scare them so easily. Dorothy is mean in this book."
"They really are," said the lion, "but that doesn't make me any braver. And as long as I know myself to be a coward, I shall be unhappy."
So once more the little company set off upon the journey, the lion walking with stately strides at Dorothy's side. Toto did not approve of this new comrade at first, for he could not forget how nearly he had been crushed between the lion's great jaws. But after a time he became more at ease, and presently Toto and the cowardly lion had grown to be good friends. During the rest of that day there was no other adventure to mar the peace of their journey. Once indeed the Tin Woodman stepped upon a beetle that was crawling along the road and killed the poor little thing. This made the Tin Woodman very unhappy, for he was always careful not to hurt any living creature. And as he walked along, he wept several tears of sorrow and regret. These tears ran down his face and over the hinges of his jaw, and there they rusted. When Dorothy presently asked him a question, the Tin Woodman could not open his mouth, for his jaws were tightly rusted together. He became greatly frightened at this, and made many motions to Dorothy to relieve him, but she could not understand. The lion was also puzzled to know what was wrong, but the Scarecrow seized the oil can from Dorothy's basket and oiled the Woodman's jaws, so that after a few moments he could talk as well as before. "This will serve me a lesson," said he, "to look where I step, for if I should kill another bug or beetle, I should surely cry again, and crying rusts my jaws so that I cannot speak." Thereafter he walked very carefully with his eyes on the road, and when he saw a tiny ant toiling by he would step over it, so as not to harm it. The Tin Woodman knew very well he had no heart, and therefore he took great care never to be cruel or unkind to anything. You people with hearts," he said, "have something to guide you, and need never do wrong. But I have no heart, so I must be very careful. When Oz gives me a heart, of course I needn't mind so much." Alright, let's knock out one more chapter today. Alright, Chapter 7, The Journey to the Great Oz. They were obliged to camp out that night under a large tree in the forest, for there were no houses near. The tree made a good thick covering to protect them from the dew, and the Tin Woodman chopped a great pile of wood with his axe, and Dorothy built a splendid fire that warmed her and made her feel less lonely. She and Toto ate the last of their bread, and now she did not know what they would do for breakfast.
"If you wish," said the lion, "I will go into the forest and kill a deer for you. You can roast it by the fire, since your tastes are so peculiar that you prefer cooked food, and then you will have a very good breakfast."
"Don't, please don't," begged the Tin Woodman. "I should certainly weep if you killed a poor deer, and then my jaws would rust again." But the lion went away into the forest and found his own supper, and no one ever knew what it was, for he didn't mention it. And the Scarecrow found a tree full of nuts and filled Dorothy's basket with them, so that she would not be hungry for a long time. She thought this was very kind and thoughtful of the Scarecrow, but she laughed heartily at the awkward way in which the poor creature picked up the nuts. His padded hands were so clumsy, and the nuts were so small, that he dropped almost as many as he put in the basket. But the Scarecrow did not mind how long it took him to fill the basket, for it enabled him to keep away from the fire, as he feared a spark might get into his straw and burn him up. So he kept a good distance away from the flames, and only came near to cover Dorothy with dry leaves when she lay down to sleep. These kept her very snug and warm, and she slept soundly until morning. When it was daylight, the girl bathed her face in a little rippling brook, and soon after they all started toward the Emerald City. This was to be an eventful day for the travelers. They had hardly been walking an hour when they saw before them a great ditch that crossed the road and divided the forests as they could not see on either side. It was a very wide ditch, and when they crept up to the edge and looked into it, They could see it was also very deep, and there were many big, jagged rocks at the bottom. The sides were so steep that none of them could climb down, and for a moment it seemed that their journey must end. "What shall we do?" asked Dorothy despairingly. "I I haven't the faintest idea," said the Woodman, and the Lion shook his shaggy mane and looked thoughtful. But the Scarecrow said,
"We cannot fly, that is certain. Neither can we climb down into this great ditch. Therefore, if we cannot jump over it, we must stop where we are." "I think I can jump over it," said the Cowardly Lion, after measuring the distance carefully in his mind.
"Then we are all right," answered the Scarecrow, "for you can carry us all over on your back one at a time."
"Well, I'll try it," said the Lion. "Who will go first?"
"I will," declared the Scarecrow, "for if you found that you could not jump over the gulf, Dorothy would be killed, or the Tin Woodman badly dented on the rocks below. But if I am on your back, it will not matter so much, for the fall could not hurt me at all."
"I am terribly afraid of falling myself," said the Cowardly Lion, "but I suppose there is nothing to do but try it. So get on my back and we will make the attempt."
The Scarecrow sat upon the Lion's back, and the big beast walked to the edge of the gulf and crouched down.
"Why don't you run and jump?"
asked the Scarecrow.
Because this isn't the way we
lions do things," he replied. Then giving a great spring, he shot through the air and landed safely on the other side. They were all greatly pleased to see how easily he did it, and after the Scarecrow had got down from his back, the Lion sprang across the ditch again. Dorothy thought she would go next, so she took Toto in her arms and climbed on the Lion's back, holding tightly to his mane with one hand. The next moment it seemed as if they were flying through the air, and then before she had time to think about it, she was safe on the other side. The Lion went back a third time and got the Tin Woodman, and then they all sat down for a few moments to give the beast a chance to rest, for his great leaps had made him short of breath, and he panted like a big dog that was running too long. They found the forest very thick on this side, and it looked dark and gloomy. After the Lion had rested, they started along the yellow brick road, silently wondering, each in their own mind, if they would ever come to the end of the woods and reach the bright sunshine again. To add to their discomfort, they soon heard strange noises in the depths of the forest, and the Lions whispered to them that it was this part of the country that the Kalidas lived. "What are the Kalidas?"
They are monstrous beasts, with bodies like bears and heads like tigers," replied the Lion, "and with claws so long and sharp that they could tear me in two as easily as I could kill Toto. I'm terribly afraid of the Kalidas."
"I'm not surprised that you are," returned Dorothy. "They must be dreadful beasts." The Lion was about to reply when suddenly they came to another gulf across the road, but this one was so broad and deep that the Lion knew at once he could not leap across it. So they sat down to consider what they should do, and after serious thought, the Scarecrow said,
Here is a great tree, standing close to the ditch. If the Woodman can chop it down, so that it will fall to the other side, we can walk across it easily."
"That is a first-rate idea," said the Lion. One would almost suspect you had brains in your head instead of straw."
The Woodman set to work at once, and so sharp was his axe that the tree was soon chopped nearly through. Then the Lion put his strong front legs against the tree and pushed it with all of his might, and slowly the big tree tipped and fell with a crash across the ditch, with its top branches on the other side. They had just started to cross the queer bridge when a sharp growl made them all look up, and to their horror, they saw running toward them two great beasts with bodies like bears and heads like tigers.
"They are the Kalidas,"
said the Cowardly Lion, beginning to tremble.
"Quick,"
said the Scarecrow.
"let us cross over."
So Dorothy went first, holding Toto in her arms, and the 10 Woodmen followed, and the Scarecrow came next. The Lion although he was certainly afraid, turned to face the Kalidas, and then gave a loud and terrible roar, so that Dorothy screamed, and the Scarecrow fell over backward, while even the fierce beasts stopped short and looked at him in surprise. But seeing that they were bigger than the lion, and remembering that there were two of them and only one of him, the Kalidas again rushed forward, and the lion crossed over the tree and turned to see what they would do next. Without stopping an instant, the fierce beasts also began to cross the tree, and the lion said to Dorothy, "We are lost, for they will tear us to pieces with their sharp claws. But stand close behind me, and I will fight them as long as I am alive."
Wait a minute,
called the Scarecrow. He had been thinking what best was to be done, and now he asked the Woodman to chop away the end of the tree that rested on their side of the ditch. The 10 Woodmen began to use his axe at once, and just as the two Kalidas were nearly across, the tree fell with a crash into the gulf, carrying the ugly, snarling brutes with it, and both were dashed to pieces on the sharp rocks at the bottom.
"Well,"
said the Cowardly Lion, drawing a long breath of relief,
"I see we are going to live longer, a little longer, and I am glad of it, for it must be a very uncomfortable thing not to be alive. Those creatures frightened me so badly that my heart is beating yet."
"Ah," said the 10 Woodmen sadly, "I wish I had a heart to beat." This adventure made the travelers more anxious than ever to get out of the forest, and they walked so fast that Dorothy became tired and had to ride on the lion's back. To their great joy, the trees became thinner and farther as they advanced, and in the afternoon they suddenly came upon a broad river flowing swiftly just before them. On the other side of the water they could see the road of yellow brick running through a beautiful country with green meadows dotted with bright flowers, and all the road bordered with trees hanging full of delicious fruits. They were greatly pleased to see this delightful country before them. "How shall we cross the river?" asked Dorothy.
That is easily done,"
replied the Scarecrow.
"The 10 Woodmen must build us a raft so we can float to the other side."
So the Woodman took his axe and began to chop down small trees to make a raft. And while he was busy at this, the Scarecrow found on the riverbank a tree full of fine fruit. This pleased Dorothy, who had not eaten but nuts all day, and she made a hearty meal of the ripe fruit. But it takes time to make a raft, even when one is industrious and untiring as the Woodman. And when night came, the work was not done, so they found a cozy place under the trees where they slept well until the morning, and Dorothy dreamed of the Emerald City and the Good Wizard of Oz, who would soon send her back to her home again. Alright, if you're still here, I am very surprised. Also, finished reading for the day. If you're just here for the audio, thank you for listening. Goodbye. See you later. If you want to stay around for a bit, I'll talk about the story. Again, it's very divergent from the original source material. Let's go back and take a look. So we got to meet a lot of new people today. We met the Woodman, the 10 Woodmen. That's confusing. You could probably hear I kept screwing that part up a bit. So in the movies, they just call him the 10 Man, because 10 is middle and wood is wood. So like middle wood man. It's just kind of confusing. But yeah, as you can see, there's definitely a lot going on with the characters. The Scarecrow is the smartest of the bunch, yet he lacks brains. The 10 Man is basically a crying vegetarian who cries upon stepping on a beetle. And the Lion is surprisingly brave. So we'll see later that these themes continue throughout the story. And it's pretty interesting. The elephant in the room is my terrible, terrible voice work for the day. Dorothy, who's like a 11-year-old girl, is just my voice. I think my 10-man voice is... I'm going for humor. I'm just doing a robot voice, like awkward robot, because he has no heart. The Lion is just pathetic, so I'm trying to sound, like a pathetic, scared person. And the Scarecrow is just me talking slower and deeper. But yeah, I think it was an interesting read today, and if you're still here, you're probably my mother. Anyways, thanks for listening, and goodbye.